Hello, in this video today I will be ranking the films of Phase 1 of the MCU. Starting off at number 6, we have Iron Man 2. This is actually the only MCU film that I find to be outright bad. There are some other MCU films that I find rather forgettable, generic, mediocre, like Avengers Age of Ultron and For the Dark World, but I still don't think those films are outright bad. And then there are other films I have have a good amount of problems with, like Eternals and Doctor Strange into the Multiverse of Madness, but I don't think those are bad movies. The big problems I have with Iron Man 2 are that it's too much of an Avengers setup film. It's just too blatantly obvious, and it doesn't feel natural in this film. Instead, it feels very forced. On top of that, there is just too much going on in this movie. Too many characters, too many plot lines, too many subplots. On top of that, even though Ivan Vanko or Whiplash is one of the main villains of the movie, for the first half hour of this film, Tony has no idea that Ivan's out there at all. And then there's that great action scene at the racetrack, but afterwards, Ivan Vanko goes to prison, and then he helps out Justin Hammer all with creating these suits. At least that's what Justin Hammer wanted, but Ivan ends up creating all these drones. So Ivan is stuck in a lab for the entire second act of the film, and he doesn't come back to face off against our heroes until the third act. And then when it comes to Justin Hammer, Sam Rockwell gives a good performance. He's entertaining to watch, but the character is very over the top to the point where you don't find him to be a serious threat. Plus, he's another businessman villain, which we already had in the first Iron Man. Also, while Black Widow's character got a lot more interesting as the franchise went on, she's not all that interesting in this film. But moving on now, number 5, we have the we have Thor, which I would say is a good but not great film. Stellan Skarsgård, Chris Hemsworth, Anthony Hopkins, Tom Hiddleston all give great performances. Kenneth Branagh brings this great sense of Shakespearean grandeur to the film. Asgard is a very visually stunning location. There's some good action scenes. There's good fish out of water humor in this film. But I think Thor's change into being a more selfless hero happens too fast. Also, the scenes on Earth are not very interesting, visually speaking, because we're just stuck in this small town in a desert. On top of that, there's a very major tone shift when you go from the grandeur of Asgard to small town in Earth. And I don't think that works. Also, Darcy is pretty annoying in the first two Thor movies. I'm not a fan of the romance between Jane Foster and Thor. So this film has great things about it, but overall I think it's just a good film. You can definitely feel that during this early period the MCU is still trying to find its footing. Now, coming in at number 4, we have Captain America the First Avenger, which I would also say is a good but not great film. Chris Evans gives a great performance as Steve Rogers. The main theme is great. Peggy Carter is a great character. The relationship between Peggy and Steve is done well. The ending to this film is very sad, and then it's paid off very well in Avengers Endgame. In fact, that film actually makes Captain America the First Avenger better in hindsight. Abraham Erskine is a great character. The origin story of Steve Rogers is very well told. Steve has this old fashioned, traditional sense of nobility, and he's virtuous in chivalrously in that old fashioned way. It's very inspiring. But Red Skull is not a very good villain. During all the scenes that he's on screen, he's just delivering exposition. The film montages through World War II. The Howling Commandos are very bland and generic, like how characters like Frigga, Lady Sif, and the Warriors Free are very underused in the first four film. But moving on now to number three, we have the Incredible Hulk. Now I know that this is going to be surprising to many people that I'm placing this film in number three, but at number three. But honestly, I think The Incredible Hulk is underrated. No, I don't think it's one of the best MCU films. It certainly feels like the black sheep of the franchise. Don't get me wrong, characters like Thaddeus Ross and the Abomination have shown back up in this franchise. It has been 100% confirmed. Samuel Stearns' character will be coming back. We have seen a different version of Betty Ross after this film. And the end credits scene has Tony Stark in it. Shield is mentioned once in this film. The origins of Hulk and the Abomination tie back to the Super Soldier Serum, so that ties this film to Captain America the First Avenger. But this is the only film where Edward Norton plays Bruce Banner. This is the only MCU film that Universal has the distribution rights to. It's one of the only MCU films that's not on Disney Plus. The tone of this film is different from the rest of the franchise. There's definitely not a huge amount of levity in this film. We've yet to see the Betty Ross from this film again in the franchise. The relationship between her and Bruce ends up not mattering at all for the MCU because it's never mentioned in any way after this film. So it can be easy to forget about this film, but I think that the action scenes are well done. I think Edward Norton gives a good performance as Bruce Banner. I think the Abomination is a good villain. Again, he's not one of the best villains in the whole franchise. He's not the most complex villain, to be sure, but I think he's good enough for this film. I'm a fan of the main theme. I also think the story is well told. Yeah, the film has issues, but I think that it should get more respect. I think it should get more respect than it does. But now moving on to number two, we have the Avengers. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Why am I placing the Avengers below Iron Man? Don't get me wrong, when the Avengers came out, it was a big deal because this was the first time that a superhero crossover film was released. Before this film came out, a lot of people were skeptical about whether a team up film like The Avengers would actually work, but it ended up working. There's a lot of funny moments in this film. The main theme, done by Alan Silvestri, is fantastic. Of course, the third act is great. Loki is a great villain. Pretty much all the performances are really good. But the third act of this film is also pretty generic and cliched because it's just our heroes facing off against waves of disposable cannon fodder. You once again have a blue beam of energy shooting up into the sky. You even have the Phantom Menace trope of a mothership being destroyed, which kills off or deactivates all the bad guys. And the plot for this film is very paper thin because it's just Loki is going to take over the Earth, so our heroes must band together to stop him. But coming in number one for me is Iron Man. This is the film that started off the MCU. And looking back on it now, it honestly can be easy to forget that Iron Man was not an A-list comic book character before this film came out. Before this film came out, the character of Iron Man was not well known to the general public, or to put another way, to people who don't read comic books. On top of that, Robert Downey Jr. was not a popular choice to play the character back when this film came out because he was dealing with a lot of personal issues, even to the point where Marvel pushed back on Robert Downey Jr. being cast in this film, but yet Iron Man ended up being a big success. In fact, I would say similar to films like Captain America the First Avenger, this is a film that's only gotten better with age because Endgame pays off this film very well. A lot of lines of dialogue have greater emotional meaning and resonance after Endgame. And while this film is simple, while looking back on it now, it definitely feels a lot more restrained compared to what the MCU is now. It's definitely a lot more grounded. It feels quaint in comparison to what the MCU has become. But Robert Downey Jr. and all the other actors and actresses give great performances. The main theme for this film is great. The action scenes that are in this film are very well done. Tony Stark's journey throughout this film is very well executed. The story is well told. The visuals look really good. The suit looks very believable. So while this film certainly does not have a huge amount of action or a huge amount of quips the same way that modern day MCU films do, I think this is a great film. And I think its simplicity is honestly what makes it stand out. But that'll be it for now.